Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is episode 38, going out on February 10, 2020. This podcast is for Red Sneaker Writers, people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them do it. This episode, we're recording live from the WriterCon Cruise. And as you may have guessed, I have some of my fellow cruisers surrounding right now participating in this podcast. We're going to talk to some of them later. We'll have the news segment, of course, and we're going to have some of these people who are on the cruise talk to you about what they've picked up this week, offer some writing tips. And our interview for this episode is with Rick Ludwig, author of the Maui Mysteries, most recently Pele's Fire. But first, the news. Just a few quick news items this week because, I'm off in the Caribbean somewhere, and what do I know about what's going on in the real world? Except I kind of sort of do. Last time we talked about the controversy surrounding American Dirt. That was the new well-selling book picked for the Oprah Book Club that nonetheless has become a firestorm after a backlash arose. This is a novel by Janine Cummings about a Mexican woman and her son who are fleeing to the United States, hoping to escape some cartel violence. It made its debut in the number one place on the New York Times bestseller list. It looked like it was going to have a smooth and pleasant ride, and then the backlash arose. People accusing the novel of being racist and saying that it contains stereotypes. Some of it may have been brought on by the publisher's campaign itself, to be sure. They have reportedly done things, for instance, at the pre-pub party, the tables were decorated with a centerpiece that involved barbed wire. And the publisher's publicity campaign mentioned that the author's husband was an undocumented immigrant, which is true, but as it turns out, he's an immigrant from Ireland. So it's possibly not what people expected. And some of the language in the book might be controversial as well, so much so that this week the publisher has announced that they are canceling the book tour for the book. The author reports that she's received death threats, and reportedly, for her safety, they've canceled the book tour, which is probably about the worst thing that could possibly happen to somebody who thinks they're on the way to a serious bestseller. In the meantime, the publisher, Macmillan, has met with a prominent Latinx group and discussed things, and has announced that they're going to be making changes in the future to try and be more sensitive on issues of diversity. Oprah has also said that this time her Oprah show on the book, which will be broadcast on Apple TV, is not going to be the usual thing, but instead she's going to gather a lot of community leaders to talk about racial issues and perhaps why the book created this firestorm. I can't think of anything worse in the world than thinking you've got the world on a string and you've got the number one hit in the nation. You've got Oprah on your side, and then suddenly people are spewing hate on Twitter and death threats and whatnot. Just let me say again, Red Sneaker Writers, what you've heard me say before. If your book involves any kind of racial, ethnic, gender, any controversial issues whatsoever, get other people to read it. Get that sensitivity read. Get people who are in the group you're writing about to comment on a way that might alert you to some of these issues before they arise. Second news item is also a continuation of a story we covered before, and that has to do with Bookshop, the new online book buying platform that's designed to benefit independent bookstores. I reported on this when the idea was first formulated and announced, and now it is live and actually in operation. According to one of the founders, Andy Hunter, the plan for Bookshop is to build, quote, a network of publishers, authors, bookstagrammers, celebrity book clubs, and other media sites to target socially conscious online consumers who are not yet buying their books online through an independent bookstore. In other words, to keep people from going to Amazon. That's their mission, and good luck with that. They have said that they're going to contribute 10% of all their sales to a pool that will be distributed evenly to independent bookstores every 6 months. The stores can become affiliates. They can get a 25% commission and so forth. Their announced goal is to capture 3% of the online book sales market. That's a pretty serious goal. I mean, I think everybody likes independent bookstores. Everybody likes to see their books on the shelves in independent bookstores, and everybody likes to occasionally have the opportunity to walk through a physical brick-and-mortar bookstore. There are some reports, one just out last week, that independent bookstores are increasing, but the increase isn't in the amount of sales, it's in the number of stores. New stores have opened. Sales are about flat. So whether that will result in something significant for the future, I don't know. Taking on Amazon is daunting, but I would encourage people, when you're posting ads and whatnot about your book, mention independent bookstores, IndieBound, and something that will give people the opportunity to shop independently if that's what they want to do. Last news item I've got to report, because Amazon just released its report on money distributed to independent authors during the past year. They say that through the Kindle Unlimited program, they've distributed about $300 million. Of course, that's going to several million people, but still a lot of money. According to Amazon, in the past year, over 1,000 independent authors earned over $100,000 from independent publishing, from self-publishing, and several thousand more are making over $50,000, which is about what they reported last year too. So those numbers are more or less level. The takeaway being that, and I'm not saying you have to publish independently, you certainly don't, but if you choose to, or you want to use the hybrid approach and do both at the same time, that's viable now. You know, not everybody is making money by far, but it's possible for people who put in the time and effort and hours and write quality fiction. And I think that's wonderful. I'm always pro authors. Anything that gives authors more opportunity to participate, more opportunity to profit from their own work, I think that's a wonderful thing. For the writing tips segment this time, I'm going to talk to some of these wonderful people we've gotten to know this week on the cruise. We had quizzes on the cruise. See, this really is live. That's why you hear silverware tinkling in the background, because they're setting up for dinner. I tried to get them to cancel dinner, but for some reason that wasn't flying on a cruise. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to some of these people and see what they've learned, what they got out of the cruise. Betsey Kulakowski, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. This has been an amazing experience. I've never been on a cruise, never really traveled very far out of country. So this has just been an awesome experience for some bucket list items. The one thing I really wanted to get out of this cruise is I wanted to have a really good, solid marketing plan for my book. I wanted to have a really good pitch and a hook and a query letter. And I feel like I'm going to walk away with all that. But I've also learned how to make my book better. So I feel like I'm going to have a good product to sell and the techniques to do it. So my advice for anybody as far as writing tips would be to learn, always learn, never quit learning. You've got to hone your craft and build your skill. And anytime you can get training, education, it's worth it.
Great. Thanks. Cary, I think you said that you've got some tips to share too. What'd you pick up this week?
Well, I'm one of those authors who's always been afraid of doing marketing and promotion on my own, of working with the book cover and that sort of
Just to be clear, you've got several published books, right?
True, yeah.
Okay.
I have also published through a small press in North Carolina, which that does no promotion or anything like that, and I've never been able to really do the promotion that I need to do for those books.
So what have you picked up this week that might be useful?
Several different areas that I can find online, and different companies and people who can help me with both the editing, which is a little bit different, but the covers and getting the book promoted and advertised, and that something that I've always been afraid to do on my own. And now I feel like that not only do I have some options, but I also have people I can call and ask about other options that will actually help me in later books.
Right, that's fantastic. Okay, one last cruiser. Marty Ludlum, how's the cruise been treating you?
Absolutely wonderful. I'm working on my first novel, so I'm kind of new to the writing business. I've got to say I really love the WriterCon Cruise. I think it benefits writers at all stages in their writing careers, not just for the super experienced. Of course, being a cruise, it gives you the chance to step away from the minutia of day-to-day grind.
You were able to find things to do in your spare time?
Yes, trying to squeeze in those 6 meals a day.
Right.
It's a difficult cruise challenge, but they make it work. But I think, importantly on the cruise, again, it's a chance to step away. You really get engrossed in your writing. You can really go deep into the narrative thread about your story. Think about it for extended time because you don't have the constant interruptions and distractions. And I think from the cruise, from the WriterCon conference, you get recognition of ideas that work and ideas that don't work, and both of which are important to develop as a writer. And I think it allows everyone to get a lot of feedback from a team that's working as a community of support, not in competition. And I think that's what a lot of people are fearful of. I think
Fantastic.
Every writer with any kind of level of experience would benefit from the WriterCon cruises.
Well, that's so hard to find your tribe, to find the people who are going to support you, but every writer needs that. We tend to think of writing being the lonely profession. We're all alone in our garrets and typing, but that's not the way it has to be, at least all the time. The more friends, the better. And I feel like this has become a circle of friends, and we've covered all levels of writing. We've covered the art and the craft and the marketing. And we've had a lot of food, too. So it's been a successful first ever WriterCon Cruise, and we'll be offering that again, of course, next year. My interview this time is with Rick Ludwig. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rick for many, many years. He's published several mystery novels in a group he calls the Maui Mysteries. The most recent of those is Pele's Fire, and I promise we're going to talk about those in just a minute. But first, I'm going to ask you my traditional first question, and if you don't know what that is, then I know you never listen to this podcast, so don't admit it. What, if you could only give one piece of advice to an aspiring writer, what would it be?
Persist.
What do you mean by that?
Everything I have, and thank you very much for having me on, and for especially allowing me to join this cruise. It's wonderful. I will say that every author, budding or otherwise, has way too many competing conflicts. Many things going on, many things that can take you away from the keyboard, many things that can keep you from thinking, keep you from spending the time you need to work out a plot point or some aspect of your work. And to me, the only way to get through that is to persist. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, for my case, my family's been very helpful in helping me persist by, especially my wife, by keeping all the distractions to a minimum wherever possible. But life does intrude. So,
no doubt. All right, so you've got this trilogy. They're called the Maui Mysteries. So fill us in. What's a Maui mystery? How does that differ from other mysteries?
Well, I lived for 8 years on Maui full-time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that was coincided with when I started writing fiction. My career is as a research scientist for about 35 plus years. But after I retired, I wanted to get back to something I loved all my life, which is writing. And Maui is a place that causes you to relax. Mm-hmm. I've never been in a place where the second you get off the plane, you feel like 500 pounds has been lifted off your back. And when you live there full time, those 500 pounds stay off your back. Well, a Maui mystery reflects that, in that Maui itself is a spiritual place. And I'm not trying to get all religious on people here, but there's a spirituality to the place. It is lush. It is vital. There are all kinds of life surrounding you, involving you. Constant winds, the trade winds,